give a warm welcome to the hosts of The Bride of Alternate Ending.
Hello, ghouls and goblins. What's that behind you? It's the Bride of Alternate Ending podcast, of course. Hosted by me.
What? I thought we only did weird things for Halloween.
No, because I've been experimenting, and Halloween was a time that I really dove in. But like my kind of sassy Southern waitress vibe that I did one time, that was pre-Halloween. So I feel like I did have to recuperate over November.
Okay.
But now we're back, and I would say this is my best work.
I mean, I just think I wasn't ready for it. So I think that I am an audience who's too fusty and conservative and caught in my ways for your radical forward-thinking art.
Of course. But yes, me, the radical forward-thinking artist, is also your ghost, Brennan Klein, and the critic you are hearing of my magnum opus introduction is my co-ghost, Tim Brayton. How are you doing today, Tim?
I'm doing very, very well. Feeling very Christmassy, very festive. It's quite wintry here in Madison, Wisconsin. There's snow on the ground, so I'm ready to ring in the season.
Oh, that's lovely.
Yeah.
That sounds really nice. It actually is it's windy here, which is basically snow
Sure.
in California. But also explains, if you notice my voice is slowly fading away over the course of this podcast. The wind has robbed me of it like Ursula's necklace. But yes, so it is Christmas time. Tim and I approach Christmas from a very secular way. We're not, holding our hands together and praying to the saints and whatnot about it. But it is Christmas time, and at least in America, it's very hard to avoid. But we thought we would cross the pond and explore a little Christmas tradition over from jolly old London town.
Okay.
If
you feel good about that choice, I feel good about that choice.
Yeah, I was holding for applause. It didn't come.
I'm sure
but yes,
they applauded who are listening to the show. I'm sure there were spontaneous outbursts whenever this episode is played.
Yeah, at the next Oscars, it will be the #1 stand up and cheer moment, right above the Flash entering the Speed Force.
God almighty.
The Flash enters the Speed Force is one of those newly iconic phrases that the Oscars have minted, and we haven't had one since Precious, based on the novel Push by Sapphire. So I just like to remind myself of that.
No, I appreciate that. That is a good thing to do.
Mm-hmm. Anyway, so yes, for Christmas we are doing 2 episodes on British ghost stories.
We are telling each other scary ghost stories, to quote the song that has that as a line.
Yeah, and maybe next month we'll do Tales of the Glories of Long Ago.
Yes.
But yes, do you have any insight into why this happens? Like why ghost stories are so
cool,
prevalent?
because it's a good and cool thing to do.
Yeah.
I don't have any idea whatsoever.
Yes, okay, great. So we are completely unresearched.
It could be just that Anglicans have taken the phrase the Holy Ghost in far too senselessly literal a way.
That is totally possible. I mean, I don't know. See, I wish I knew. I wish I had looked into this. I am very sorry, everyone, for not doing my due diligence. But I don't know if A Christmas Carol is the reason this happens, or if it is an example of it.
It is an example of it. I'm actually quite sure of that.
Okay, well that's great. That's what I needed to know. So I appreciate that. Anyway, so we were kind of done with Christmas themed horror for a while because there's not that much that's very good, and we've covered quite a bit of it. So this is what we're doing. These are stories that don't necessarily take place on Christmas, although some of them were released on or around Christmas because that is a very common thing in the UK.
Yeah, it is a thing that happens. The family gets together to watch a scary TV movie, and my sense is that the 24th of December, Christmas Eve, is when you watch the sort of like more for the adults and the older teens sort of horror movies, and Christmas Day is when you watch the horror movie for the whole family.
that's so nice. What about Boxing Day? That's when the servants watch a horror movie, right?
I don't I know that Boxing Day is a bigger thing in the UK than it is here, but I don't actually know what they do for it.
Yeah, fair enough. Um, but yes. Oh shit, I totally lost my train of thought. It was gonna be a great thing that I was going to say though. But anyway, so our Patreons, we gave them 5 nominees of British ghost stories, and they voted for us to cover the original adaptation of the novel The Woman in Black. It's a TV movie from 1989. And
From December 24th, 1989.
hell yeah, baby. Christmas Eve, we're doing that adult one.
Yep.
Yeah, and it is a novel by Susan Hill that I have not read. Have you perchance read this novel?
I have not read. I did a little bit of research into it when the remake or new adaptation, or however we want to frame it, came out in 2012, but I think it hit the States in 2013, if I'm remembering correctly. So I knew a little bit about it then, and then I redid that research now. So it seems like all 3 versions have the same bones.
Mm-hmm.
They take it in different directions, and it certainly seems like all 3 versions end differently.
Okay, I do like that. Because I've seen because what you're talking about, the 2012 and or 2013. I feel like I saw it in 2012, but I couldn't possibly tell you. The Daniel Radcliffe readaptation of the same novel. That was certainly my first experience with this story.
Same.
And I was I think I was a senior in high school. Yeah, it must have been 2012.
Yeah, I'm looking it up right now. It came out in February of 2012 in the US.
Yes. So I saw it, well, randomly at the movie theater at Downtown Disney, which is not the spookiest place, but I remember being really kind of freaked out by that movie and kind of, like jumping at shadows afterwards, walking home through Downtown Disney.
Sure.
But I was a teenager, so I'm curious to check it out again and see if it has any actual potency or if I just hadn't really seen horror movies yet.
I found it to have potency, but I don't know if it would continue having potency a second time.
Yes, I'm curious about that. But so basically my idea of the story is colored by that. And that movie has very grandiose production design, and there's like it's got all the spooky, like the haunting stuff you kind of expect.
Yes.
From a horror movie. So I bring this up just to talk about like my context of where I'm coming at with the much cheaper 1989 TV movie.
It is indeed. And it's the difference between a relatively well-heeled, I mean, there's no such thing as like big budget British horror, to be clear. And The Woman in Black, we should point out, the remake, was the second or third theatrical release by the newly reconstituted Hammer Films. So part of a long-standing tradition of British cinema that way. But there is just there are big budget British films, but not big budget British genre films, I don't really think. So it's not like that film was expensive, but it was still a theatrical release intended for international distribution. This is a TV movie, and it's not even a BBC TV movie. It's an ITV TV movie.
Yeah. So you're going quite a few steps down the ladder.
It's definitely like we are not talking lots of money spent on very elaborate sets here, for sure.
Yeah, which can be done. I think we will talk about our differing views on whether or not this movie did do it. But we should do the plot a little bit. It's got a very basic plot, and
it's got a very, very basic plot.
Yeah, it kind of does and it doesn't, but it's generally pretty basic. So basically, a solicitor named Arthur Kidd, who's played by Adrian Rollins, who starred in the Harry Potter movies as Harry Potter's dead dad. So there's a very weird connection between the two adaptations.
That is indeed, and if I'm not mistaken, I'm actually trying to verify that right now. I think he also had a small role in The Woman in Black 2, the sequel to the
Angel of Death?
Angel of Death. He does. He has a small role in The Woman in Black 2, Angel of Death.
What? How is that the one that was like, we really should pay homage to the legacy of The Woman in Black?
I mean, it's at least plausible that he was just cast because British actors get cast and everything, and that it was not an intentional homage, although that would be a surprise to me.
That is true. Kind of like how if you're making the turn of the screw, a red grave will just appear on your doorstep.
Right.
um, yeah, there's only so many people in England, and then only so many of them are actors, so that does
Exactly.
make sense. Um, but yes, anyway, so Arthur Kidd is sent by his boss to the town of Crithen Gifford, which is a great English town name.
Hmm.
Actually, there's a lot of great English names.
And I think it's probably actually a great Welsh town name, but it's a great
Mm,
rural Britain town name.
yes, yes, yes. Um, but yeah, so he meets this guy named Sam Tuvey, because he has to. Basically, he's the executor of the will of a dead woman named Mrs. Drablow, who lived at Eel Marsh House. This is all great so far.
Eel Marsh House is the most ungodly British name you could give to a structure.
It is. It's delicious. It's wonderful, and it is spooky.
Yes.
Um, but yeah, so it is this house off in the middle of the marsh, that can only be accessed by this a causeway. That's what they call it. It's a tidal causeway.
Hmm.
So it only appears when the tide is low. So basically, once you're in the house and the tide comes in, you're stuck.
You're on a small island in the marsh.
Yes, which I would argue maybe is not an element that gets played with enough or really at all. Like, uh,
The the marsh gets played with. The stuck on an island does not.
yeah, like the causeway looks incredible. That's definitely the best element of spookiness, I think, aesthetically for me at
Mhm.
least. But I feel like I didn't really get the sense that much that he was trapped there.
No, I would not say that I got that sense either.
Yeah, it doesn't feel as isolating as it could have. But I'm skipping ahead. But
Video. And I will go to bat. The marsh also facilitates the use of lots and lots of fog. And
yes,
I am a pro fog horror movie viewer.
oh, very much. And they called it the sea fog was called frets, right? In this town.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, that's fun. Um, well, you can see like very much all of the kind of the bones of that gothic horror novel
Hmm.
that is going on here. But anyway, so the movie basically splits its time between Arthur Kidd going through the what Mrs. Drablow has left behind. He's essentially supposed to sell the house and kind of price the items and whatever, just kind of get clear everything up, tie up all the loose ends. But he is experiencing visitations from this creepy woman dressed in black who's always kind of lurking in the background.
Lurking in the background, no one else really seems to be acknowledging that she's there, but there's kind of a conspicuous way in which no one is looking in her direction.
Yes. Yeah, so it splits its time between kind of eerie happenings at the house and then him back in town talking to the various townsfolk and realizing, that the town has a history of dead children and bad things happening and just kind of, is there a connection between the two? Who's to say?
It is difficult to imagine this being a motion picture if the answer to that question is no. But
Yeah,
yes,
exactly.
it is a mystery.
Yeah. So this was your first time watching this version, right?
The first time watching this version, I have seen obviously the 2012 film, but only the one time, only when it was in theaters. So it's been a bit, although I remembered the details insofar as the plot is really a pretty straightforward ghost story.
Oh yeah. No, it really is. Well, it's so straightforward. It's so like elemental and fundamental. And maybe some of the townspeople stuff is a little more complicated in terms of like there's a little bit of plotting there.
A little.
A very little. But there's a little bit of like, oh, there's a clue and it will be established later what that
Mhm.
means. Um but I was surprised by my recall of the story of the woman in black. Like once I got that first scene refreshed, I was like, oh yeah, I know kind of the whole structure
Kind
of
of the
what's
whole
going
structure of
on
what's going
here.
to happen, yeah.
Um, I guess let's get into it. Were you scared by the woman in black, or did it evoke feelings in you
It,
of spookitude?
I would say more that it evoked feelings of spookitude. Um, Scary is such a fungible state of mind. Um, I found it to be the kind of film that was nice to watch on a winter night when it was dark, if that makes sense.
Yes, it totally makes sense. It's kind of like, I mean, this is what I expected walking into, specifically exploring like British ghost stories, and especially in the kind of television space, which is where a lot of them live
Mm-hmm.
or die.
Hey.
Um, but yeah, it's definitely like wrap yourself in a blanket with a mug of hot cocoa and be mildly have a mildly eerie
It's
atmosphere.
it's a movie in which things are wrong and the wrongness of things manifests as a sort of creepy is strong. It's creepy is strong, but there's, I think, a sense of the world being about 5 degrees off of center, maybe.
Yeah, and there is, I mean, like the marsh itself, there is that kind of, it's an atmosphere that's less like a rattle you in your bones, but more of a like creeping damp, where it's just
Yeah,
like,
it's a very damp movie.
yeah.
It really is.
And I would say I found quite a few moments effective, and one way more effective than I ever expected.
Is it, I wonder, the same moment that I found way more effective than I was expecting? Because is it late in the movie?
Yes,
And does it
we
not take place in the house?
correct.
Okay, I think it's the same moment.
Yeah, I mean, should we just talk about it? It's a ghost movie. There's not really
It's a
any
ghost movie. There's not
spoilers.
really spoilers to speak of.
Yeah,
Certainly not for this moment, no.
yeah.
So it turns out the woman he keeps seeing in black, who gives the story its title, The Woman in Black, turns out she's a ghost of a woman in
What?
black.
I'm shaken to my
I know. You
core.
can't, how can you even imagine? But so she does. The rumor in town is that if the, not so much if you see the woman in black, but if the woman in black sees you seeing her, that means that a child is going to die in town soon. And so that's kind of what this solicitor bumbles his way into, and he's like gawking at the woman in black, and she's like fully annoyed that he's gawking at her. And of course, the house that he is currently trying to dispose of is the house where sort of all the secrets of her dark past are. So she's kind of latched onto him in a way. And so at a certain point, he's gotten the jimmies enough from his experiences that he wants to leave. So he's ready to go away. Um, and he's staying in the inn in town, and he hears the voice of the child that he's been hearing, who seems to be attached to the woman in black in some capacity. And he looks around, and who should be basically standing over his bed looking down at him but Pauline Moran, the woman in black herself, Pauline Moran being the actress, British TV sort of mainstay. And I guess it's a jump scare. Like, I don't know what you
Yeah.
characterize it if not a jump scare, but it's a jump scare that lasts for like 10 seconds, and that's not how jump scares work.
No, it's this really sustained note of intensity that it did really work for me. And there's this sense of she's getting ever closer as this kind of like, kind of wailing is going on.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's so uncomfortable too. Like it just feels wrong in a
It
good
does,
way.
and it's weird because like you break that moment down in terms of what it's doing, and it shouldn't really work. Like absolutely the entirety of the movie, it's quite well lit. Like
Hmm.
there is a very limited amount of mood lighting in this British TV production, which is just true of British TV productions. So there's not really moody lighting. There's not like quick cutting. The camera's not like flipping back and forth between her face and his face. It's just kind of a close up for several seconds, and she's not even like, I mean, she's screaming. The soundtrack is making her scream, but she's really just holding her face in this kind of like snarl. And that's really all she's doing. And we're just looking at this for several seconds, and it just worked. And it's weird that it works, I think, but it works.
No, it's really weird that it works, especially because previous close-ups of this character I thought completely undermined her power because the makeup is a little cheesy.
It is a little cheesy.
It's very much like Spirit Halloween fright makeup. Um, it's not a particularly interesting ghost design. I think from very far away, when she's in the background of frames lurking, that is almost always effective.
It's more effective when she is a presence that you can't quite pin down than when you start to actually think of her as a character. I would agree with that.
Yeah, like once there's close-ups and you're like, okay, well, this is just a woman with some shitty face paint.
It feels almost like someone who didn't take her makeup off before getting not enough sleep.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Like it's a little cracked, and it's just very eyeshadow heavy,
Yes.
basically. Um, so yeah, the fact that it works so well, I don't know. It doesn't make any sense, but it does. It works.
Yeah, I know. It's a really good moment. It even kind of feels weird for it to happen in the movie when it does, because
Mm.
he does not seem to, after this experience, be more concerned or scared than he already was.
Yeah, that's a good point. Um,
But it is a moment that I liked quite a lot. It was the scariest moment. It was maybe the only scary moment in the film. I would go so
yeah,
much.
and I think there are plenty of effective spooky moments. Um, like I would like to point to when he's kind of investigating the graveyard in the foggy marsh,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a shot where it I mean it might be hidden by a clever editing trick that I didn't notice in the moment, but there is a part where you feel like you've been spending a sustained amount of time with him in a shot, just kind of investigating these graves. And there's a part where he kind of takes a step in one direction, and it's revealed that the woman in black is like exactly behind him and has been
Yes,
blocked by his body from the camera, and that's
yes,
really effective.
it's good shit. That's a good trick. Whenever someone can pull that off, I'm always pleased. Like it's one of the old horror movie tricks, but it's a good one. There's a reason people keep using it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's creepy. I found so the I think the movie as a whole is creepy. I think, in case it hasn't sort of emerged, which I don't know that it has from the way we've been talking, I did like this movie quite a bit more than you, is my belief.
Yes.
Yes. So I think there were lots of moments that were creepy-ish. Like, again, creepy enough that I'm in my apartment, it's dark, I've turned off the light, I'm feeling, you know, again, a little, not shook up, but a little unsettled in a way. And that's sort of me making a bargain with the movie that I'm going to feel that way. But like it worked on me. So lots of stuff in here that I thought was solidly creepy. One of the things that I really did like in that sense was there's a kind of recurring thing where the tragedy that creates the woman in black as a ghost of revenge involves a carriage drawn by a horse with a child on it, having gone awry on its path either to or from, I think from Eelmarsh House back to the mainland. It lost its way on that very, very thin causeway and fell into the marsh, and everything, all people and horses involved died. They drowned in the marsh. And the first time that our main character sort of encounters this spectral activity, it's just a completely thick, foggy day. He can't see more than a handful of feet in front of him. And he hears all this noise of the cart and the horse and the screaming and the splashing and whatnot. And it's creepy and weird because he can't see anything. And he's convinced something's out there. He doesn't know what's going on. Later in the film, he encounters the same activity, but it's on a clear, sunny day. So he hears the exact same set of sounds, but then he's looking out and there's clearly nothing happening. And that second time actually worked on me a little bit because it was, again, it was that sense of wrongness. It wasn't that it was a sense of so much like something's jumping out and saying boo, as just the world's not right. There's a disorder in the world here. And it worked for me. I mean, is it a movie that I shit myself from terror watching? Certainly not.
No. And I hear that. I think that the movie loses a lot for me, especially whenever he's in the house. Um, I think that this could have worked like in that kind of uncanny way where something is intruding upon a space where it shouldn't. But I think that the house is so emphatically unspooky. It just looks like a British person's house. It's very square. It's got lots of furniture in it. It's not exciting to look at, and not enough uncanny stuff happens. And like I said, there's no sense of isolation or claustrophobia or like stuff that I think probably worked really well in the book. And does, if I recall, work pretty well in the remake as far as being inside the house in the way that that feels oppressive in some way. So whenever he's there doing his thing, I just my brain kind of was like, let's shut down.
And I kind of wondered if that was going to be the main point of disagreement between ourselves, and it sounds like it is certainly one of them. I I liked the lack of overtly scary house. Like it's not what I expect to see really in a haunted house movie. But in a sense it's kind of a nice change because like I'm a great big fan of The Haunting. Like we all know this.
Mm.
Haunting is a movie that has a haunted house that is just the most unambiguous purpose built set. No one ever
Mm.
lived in that house. It does not in any way resemble domestic architecture. It's just there to scare the shit out of you. So I can't say that I don't like that in movies, but I think there's a sense in which if a house was haunted, actually, the house wouldn't suddenly like take on this kind of hulking gothic chiaroscuro menace. It would just be a
Mm.
house in which there was a ghost. And that is one of the things that I thought was charming about the two. I almost said the original Woman in Black, the one I saw first, the 2012,
Uh huh. Uh huh.
is that the house is just such an over the top set piece. And there's well, we'll get there. Uh, and so it worked on me, but I think it works on me in a different way. It doesn't not work on me that this is just a house, and I hear that and I agree with it. I think to me it was part of the appeal was that it was just a house.
Yeah. I understand what you're saying. First of all, I do think so. I think in terms of like the haunting, or in terms of like that, I almost said original Woman in Black too. I caught your
I
disease.
primed you.
Yeah, you did. But there's the idea of like this is a place that contains an ancient evil that over time has poisoned the house in some
Sure.
way. Um, but and I don't disagree that there's something spooky about a normal house being intruded upon. Like that's where the paranormal activity movies work when they really work. Um, I don't think what they were doing in the house or with the house was ever interesting enough to me. To justify it being so boring to look at and
That's
spend
fair.
so much time there. I would say there's two shots inside the house that I liked. There was the ball falling from the ceiling in the
Yes.
nursery. That's a great shot. And then there's a pretty decent shot of the lamps in the hallway swinging back and forth, and he's
Okay.
like standing in the front door area.
Sure.
But beyond that, I didn't really find anything redeeming about being in that house.
That is fair. I mean, that's definitely a legit response. Here's my second defense. Not so much a pitch because I'm not looking to change your mind, but my other defense of why I liked it. So the 2012 film, you have Harry Potter in a haunted house, right? And that's
Uh-huh.
what the film is. So like, there's I think this sense of like it needs to be over the top. It needs to be kind of a spectacle. It needs to be this. It needs to be that. In this film, no offense to the actor Adrian Rollins, who I think was perfectly fine. I think it was good even in this role. He's just kind of this like pasty English guy, bad skin,
Milk
kind of
toast
ratty
guy.
hair, just kind of a not very exciting looking guy. He's not a movie star. He's no Daniel Radcliffe even. And there's always the thing, like this is a joke people have been making for ages, like you go into this place that looks like a kind of sentient mausoleum. Why do you stay there? And I
Mm-hmm.
believe that in a big budget movie, Harry Potter stays in a house that looks like that. This guy doesn't do that. He's too goddamn British. And he's a boring, unimaginative British person is sort of the trick of it,
Mm-hmm.
I think. This is not someone who I think sees ghosts and goblins even when they're right in his goddamn face, like literally, like that's text. So I think he would feel it would feel weird for him to go into this like gothic monstrosity of a house and not react to it. And it's sort of the story is that he's not reacting to it.
Yeah. I think maybe I'd like something for him to react to.
Okay,
you know?
that's fair. Some people like plot in their movies and some don't.
Yeah, well see, and here's the thing. Well, so that's the thing of like, okay, you maybe the setup could have been you're bringing this milk toast guy, You're taking him across the marsh. He hasn't seen the house yet. He doesn't know what it looks like. You drop him off. He has to maybe walk up the drive a little bit, and it's super foggy, so he can't see it. The horse and cart fucks off. The tide comes in, and then he sees the house, and he's like, fuck, I'd like to leave, but he can't.
Sure.
And that's what the setup seems to be.
No, and I get that. And that's actually I think the biggest structural difference, setting aside the ending, which is totally different, but the biggest structural difference between this and the 2012 film, the 2012 film, I think, is absolutely built around his first night in the house as this kind of like bravura, 20-minute wordless throw absolutely every ghost story thing we can throw at you. It's the thing I very concretely remember about the film, and I loved it, and I'm sure I would love it again. Just this real over the top, holding no punches, like we're gonna rattle Harry Potter to death with spooky jump scares and shit. Great sequence, great sequence. Structurally, he just spends more time in this movie in town, I feel.
In the 89 one?
Yeah.
Yes, very, very much.
And so I feel like it feels like there's more of a sense of he's going back and forth between the house and the town.
Yeah, that's true.
Which is not in any real way reflecting on what you just said, other than like the trapping him in this horrible haunted house is just not it is not on the movie's radar as a strategy.
No, and frankly, most of town is really boring too. I didn't click with a lot of it. I'd say about 60% of the stuff with the woman in black really worked for me, but she's not really in it that much.
She's not in it that much.
And the story, insofar as it wants to explore its story at all, it is just doing a little bit of that mystery, like putting the pieces together of what he's encountering.
Right.
And look, I've seen the story before. I know what he's encountering, so that does diminish that does bias me against it because I'm like, let's get to the point. But I don't know that I would have found it super compelling even if I didn't know what was going on, because like you said, there's a spooky woman, there's some dead kids. Like you kind of can put two and two together.
Yeah, you can put two and two together, no, for sure. And that's all very true and very fair. I think what is going unsaid, and I said this in my Letterboxd review, so I think it would come up at some point. I find this era of British television where so much of the content is, here's a town, nothing really happens in this town, guy from London's in the town, he's kind of cross. Like, I find that, it goes back to the blanket and chocolate thing. I find it just pleasant. Like, I find hanging out in these nondescript small towns in a shot on film British TV production soothing. And so I think the stuff that you're regarding as boring is, to me, just like, oh, it's cozy. It's like wearing slippers. And then every now and then the slippers have like a snake in them.
Sure. Up to the snake point, I do understand what you're saying. Yeah. And I don't possess that. So yeah, there was really nothing for me to really sink my claws into. And it's not that I can't get into like more domestic issues or more small town issues or whatever. It just wasn't particularly
no, and that's perfectly fair. No, I mean, it is the thing that it is, right? It's a 1989 made for ITV film, and I think I was just on its side because of that. Like, it did not have to win me over. It sounds like it had to win you over, and it did not succeed in doing so, or even really care to make the attempt.
Yeah, well, it in the first third, I was feeling it a little bit. I was giving it a little bit of slack. Like, all right, let's see if you can take this rope and hang me with it. Let's see what's going on. And it just kind of didn't. And also, there are quite a few things that I think are off screen in ways that don't feel right. Unlike the carriage sequence in the fog, but like there are two fires in the movie that you don't really see much of. There's more of the second one, the one that he sets in his office. You actually get to see that kind of blazing in front of him.
Sure.
But he's like, oh, the house burned down. We didn't show it to you, because
burning down a house's costs,
Yeah, exactly. But it feels like, I don't know, they did promise things that just weren't really going on.
That's fair.
I don't know.
I
It
just
was
I have nostalgia for this era. Not even this era of production. I do have nostalgia for this era of ITV in particular. So
yeah, and that's totally fine. I did like sorry, totally random tangent. I did like the younger solicitors in his office absolutely cracking the fuck up over the gold rush
yes,
because we were trying to set the time period. But they're like,
no,
he
it's
eats a shoe. Could you possibly imagine?
I will say I found that scene charming in its awfulness.
Oh yeah,
Like it's now in general, the stuff back in London just pleased me because just idiots in a London law office is its own kind of like genre of British art. And I found it to be like, oh, I know what this is about. This is just like going to an office and having whatever sort of dopey culture they have there and kind of laughing about it. Um, but no, I mean certainly the gold rush of it was just the strangest possible way to set the time too, because it's not like all that many people in 1989 can immediately tell you, ah, yes, gold rush 1925.
uh
I mean, they can probably. I guess it gets us to. It's kind of modern in that there's like cars and all, but it's definitely old. It's pre
yeah,
War II for sure. So it's
yeah,
like it's out of time in a way, but not like the Victorian era, right? That
yeah.
technology.
They have electricity, but it's a little bit of a surprise when that everybody has it.
Yeah, you would not you're not shocked to hear that like small town villages are not 100% electrified.
Yeah, exactly. And he's surprised that Eelmarsh House has electricity.
Exactly, exactly.
Um, yeah, I don't know. It, it's a pretty meat and potatoes
It is, and
thing. Is there anything else?
I mean, I want to throw a couple
Yeah.
hugs out in the direction of the cast. I did really like Adrian Rollins
Mm.
in this.
Hmm.
I'm curious if you had any sort of response to him at all.
Not not a strong response either way, but no negative response at
Okay.
all. He was totally pleasant.
No,
I liked his hair.
I found him to have the right energy of like again, he is a specifically dull British solicitor, I think. And I think that's the difference between this and Harry Potter versus the movie. Between this and the Daniel Radcliffe Woman in Black, that is a movie where he enters the film with already a kind of traumatized past and a sort of tendency towards being shoved in the direction of hypersensitive spookiness, right? This is a movie that's not that. This is a movie about a very boring man who like wanders into ghosts and isn't ready for it because he's boring. And that I think is an interesting way to play Ghost Story. And I think he's very good at I he's very good at being boring, sounds like an insult. I think he's doing this purposefully. I don't think it's a dull performance. I think it's a
Uh
good
huh.
performance of a dull man.
Yes, I do completely understand that. I think there is a way to show boringness or boredom and not be boring yourself. Like
Yes.
I don't think this movie crosses the line into not boring often enough for me.
Fair. The other thing I was curious about, since I said the only like really substantial difference, I think, is the ending. What were your feelings about the ending?
Well, so I don't. I only have I have a specific memory of an image from the ending of the 2012 one, but I can't say exactly what the context is. Um, I seem to remember. I feel like they ended similarly, so maybe I'm wrong. Because I remember there's this whole business in the 2012 one with like a train. And I think his wife and kids show up and maybe get hit by the train, or he's worried they're going to, and he's hallucinating it.
So
Does he jump in front of the train?
my memory is that he has lost his wife and children to an accident years before, and
Okay.
that's actually their ghosts he's seeing, and he then gets killed by that train, and he's able to revisit them in the afterlife.
Got it. Okay, that is very different.
That is how I recall the ending of the. That's how I recall, and again, I haven't seen it in 10 years either. The book, which I have not read, but based on what I've been able to glean from a Wikipedia summary, the book appears to have an altogether different framework. Like the story of Eelmarsh House is quite similar, but like it involves him having in the past lost his family and now he has a second family, and he's
Mm.
telling them the story of Eelmarsh House, which turns out at the very end to have also been the story of how the woman in black got her revenge on his first son.
Oh, okay.
So again, they're all playing with similar. They're all playing in the same sort of broad bucket of the solicitor's wife and kid die in some capacity, but it
Hmm.
feels like they all die at a different point in the story, and they all die in different ways in the three versions of the story.
Got it. And the solicitor does not die in all of them.
He does not die in the book, as far as I'm aware, and he does die in
Okay.
both film adaptations.
Yes. So yeah, the end of the 1989 adaptation, spoiler alert, I guess, is basically he gets home, he mostly thinks the problem has been solved or kind of doesn't, but is trying to pretend it's fine.
He's trying to pretend
Um
it's fun
yeah.
because he's British.
Um yeah, exactly. But yeah, so they're like going out on a boat and he sees the woman in black standing on the water, which was that was pretty neat.
Yeah,
And then a big tree branch capsizes their boat, and we were meant to understand that he and his wife and at least one of their kids has
has
died.
died. Right, because her whole thing, the woman in black thing, is killing kids, so she has to kill his kid. He just happens
Yeah,
to be in the boat when the kid gets killed.
yeah. I mean, I thought it was fine. It's the end to this kind of ghost story. I can't say I was attached enough to him as a character to. I wasn't rending my garments and smearing ashes on my face, you know.
Well,
But
well, for me, my response to it was less about the plot content itself and more about the sort of weird combination of really, really loving the image of the woman in black standing on the water,
mm-hmm.
which was like a new thing at that point, and it felt, even though I think I was ready for her to arrive at that place, even though they're miles and miles from Ilmarsh House, uh, her appearing in that way caught me off guard, and I like that.
Yes,
And then that immediately leads into just that horrible shots of the tree falling over, like the same action multiple times from different angles, and sometimes it's in slow motion, but I don't think always. And it looked so cheap and so stupid. So it was this weird combination of like among my favorite images in the whole movie and almost certainly my specific least favorite image in the whole movie. Basically, tie things up and leave us.
Yeah, I mean, I think I was kind of primed for that because there is a part where a girl early on gets hit by a falling log and kind of crushed underneath it, and it's less orgasmically edited, but it is edited around in that cheap TV movie way, you know, where
Sure.
you're not even seeing a stunt child and a stunt log. You're
Right.
not seeing anything. You're seeing the before and the after.
And this
Um,
and this that's the thing. The ending was just so much worse than that. Is my
It is
feeling.
so much worse, but I think for me, so because you have your 70s and 80s British television comfort or whatnot, but I've been watching a lot of Melrose Place, um,
Ah,
so that kind of like overheated soapy editing that's really unsubtle is something that I'm kind of familiar with in this moment in my watching of things.
okay. Fair
So
enough.
yeah,
Fair
like
enough.
when Heather Locklear's boyfriend gets like launched off of a balcony and hits a chandelier on his way down to the floor, like we're seeing that from every possible angle.
Sure. Okay. Well, that makes sense to me. I can appreciate that.
Yeah, so that didn't particularly bother me, but I understand that it is not good. But by
Mhm.
that point in the movie, I was like, it was a pleasant surprise to have that nice shot of the woman in black, but I was not invested in any
That
element of the movie at that
that
point.
that is fair.
But I'm sorry it hurt you.
It's okay. I love good editing too much to be able to let bad editing go by without commenting on it.
Yeah, and I think that's completely fair, and that's why I can't wait for you to see my Big Fat Greek Wedding 3.
Eventually, it's on the long list. It's not on
I
the
saw it.
short
I saw it
list.
on the long list. So yeah, maybe you won't, and that's fine. Um. Anyway, I guess I'm done talking about this movie. Is there
Yeah,
anything else you
I
want to throw
I
out?
don't really have anything else other than I think it's good. I think it's a good time. I can imagine revisiting this some winter's night in the future. And I'm gonna formally come down. I don't know if it's obvious that this is my opinion or not. I'm formally coming down on team. I actually like this better than the remake. I
Really?
do.
Okay. See, I kind of got a hankering to rewatch the remake. so maybe I can judge for myself. I mean, obviously I would like it more. But I don't know if I will like it less than I did originally.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
No, that makes sense. Like
Okay.
I can only imagine liking it less than I did when I saw it in theaters, but I can also imagine liking it the same. I cannot imagine liking
Yeah.
it more.
Yeah, I
But
don't
I can
imagine.
I can certainly imagine liking it the same, and I liked it. I just I
Yeah.
again I like the kind of stuffy Britishness of this one better, and I gather that is something you don't agree with.
Well, not the stuffy Britishness of this one. There are stuffy British things that I can get into. I've seen every Jane Austen movie. I've seen all of
Well,
them,
that's true. That's
and
a
some of
different that's a
them,
different mode.
yeah, it is very different. But some of them veer incredibly stuffy.
No, that's quite true.
um, but let's say, I mean, you didn't like this either, but like the stuffy Britishness of perhaps the movie Life Force, not my vibe.
No, and that is a film that's doing it by accident, I think, and I think this film is doing it on purpose.
Yeah, you're probably right.
Or at least it's the difference between a big budget sci-fi movie and a no budget TV movie.
Yeah, which is a difference. It's a difference in context, but.
Yeah, exactly.
I will have a second chance at
will.
approaching another story of this type. In 2 weeks, we will be returning. So we're traveling through time. We are moving one day forward and about a decade back because we are watching a movie that was released on Christmas Day. Right? That's what you told me.
I'm pretty confident that it was, yes. So today's movie was Christmas Eve. Next week or next 2 weeks movies released Christmas Day, and I think it's actually a BBC, not an ITV. But I can quickly try to find
Ooh.
that out for you.
Yeah, and I believe it was 1972. But yeah, we can pull
It was
up
72,
that.
so 17 years earlier.
Wow,
And
yeah.
yes, December 25th. So exactly one day later and 17 days earlier, and it was BBC Two, the
Oh,
Thinking Man's BBC.
but yes, the title of that movie that we'll be watching is The Stone Tape. Another one that neither Tim nor I have seen, and
Yeah.
I'm very excited.
I've heard great things about it. It shares a screenwriter. It shares a screenwriter Nigel Neal, who obviously adapted The Woman in Black from a novel, but I believe The Stone Tape is a Nigel Neal original. So
Oh well, I can't wait to see what he comes up with off the dome. Anyway, that's gonna be what that's gonna be, and thanks so much for listening, everyone. We'll catch you again with the Stone Tape. And I don't know, have a good warm December.
Have a scary Christmas.
Ooh.